Seltzer Kings.
Podcasts.
So, you just started using LinkedIn Premium. Now what? Well, on your premium company page, you noticed around 7.5 times more page engagement and 5 times more page views. Well done. And now, new clients are messaging you. All because you're using LinkedIn Premium, which helps you get the business growth you want. Think big, small business. Think big. Start your free trial at linkedin.com/premium small business. That's linkedin.com/premium small business.
All I'm saying is, what could any American possibly have to offer an advanced alien civilization? Taco Tuesday?
The following podcast contains
profanity, food jokes, and tired comedy references.
Explicit language.
Hello and welcome to the podcast that asks a simple question. When you made your travel plans based on something you heard on Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell, what the hell were you thinking? I'm your host, Dave Bledsoe, and this is episode number 443, the Hale Bopp, Hale Bopp edition of the show, where we talk about the departure of the away teams in part 2 of Packing His Purple Shroud, the end of Heaven's Gate. Stay tuned. What the Hell You Thinking podcast is brought to you by Arts Intergalactic Tours, your getaway to the heavens. Are you struggling to find the perfect getaway for your group, looking to book passes for a long-term adventure for your congregation or church assembly, and need the best prices on package deals to the great beyond? Then look no further than Arts Intergalactic Tours. We provide discount rates to anywhere in the known universe for parties greater than 5. From a loop around the Pleiades to a slow voyage around the Crab Nebula, Arts Intergalactic can help you plan, book, and depart for the interstellar reaches with the best prices this side of Wolf 359. When it's time to leave the Earth behind, book passage with Arts Interstellar Tours.
From the high desert and the great American Southwest, I bid you all good evening, good morning across all these many time zones. It's going to be a very, very exciting show this morning. So buckle down and get ready. A lot of surprises coming up. I'm Art Bell, and this from the Tahitian and Hawaiian Island chains in the west, eastward across this great nation, to the Caribbean and the U.S. Virgin Islands, south into South America, north well to the pole, and worldwide on the internet. This is Coast to Coast AM. Great to be here. In a moment coming up, we've got a very special program. Ahead of that program, though, I do have some announcements, some things that I've got to get done here. Professor Courtney Brown is going to be my guest. He is a remote viewer, and he has some of the most exciting news that a person can imagine. And with respect to that news, or part of it, just part of it, there is a new and worrisome photograph of the comet Hale Bopp.
You know, I used to be quite the world traveler back in my youth.
Oh, here he goes again.
Man, in those days, I was considered what, well, you might call me a jet setter. If the jets in question were all ungainly gray aircraft designed to carry large amounts of troops and cargo into war zones.
Sounds posh.
I assure you, it wasn't. There were 3 major cargo planes that the U.S. of AF used to haul us sad sons of bitches they were sending to some shithole that didn't want us there, and honestly, we didn't want to be there. The biggest and most comfortable was, of course, the C-5 Galaxy, a behemoth of a plane that looked like someone took a whale, bolted on wings, and shoved jet engines under the flippers. And when you took a look at it, all you could think was,
Seriously? That thing flies?
I mean, it did, not gracefully, but you could shove a shitload of troops and cargo on one. Now, the next was the venerable C-141, a more traditional-looking plane. If you squinted, you could imagine it could be like a discount airline.
Spirit Airlines is now boarding group whatever.
The problem with the C-141 was that it was old. It was old when I was in the service, and that was 30 years ago.
Why are you so old?
Yeah, trust me, I'm not thrilled about that either. People went to Vietnam on those goddamn planes, and they were the same planes I was taking to the Persian Gulf in the 1990s. You know, as old as the 141 was, it was still infinitely superior to the third most common form of airlift I experienced. the KC-135 Stratotanker, which was, and still is, a flying gas station.
Fill her up, Howard.
Not only was that plane much older than the 141, it was only tangentially a cargo plane, meaning that you and all the cargo were crammed above 200,000 gallons of jet fuel. By comparison, a 747 fully loaded only carries 60,000 gallons of jet fuel. And that meant that you, the unwilling passenger, were riding on an extraordinary large amount of very flammable liquid in the event of an unexpected gravity incursion.
Planes crash. People die.
But that wasn't the worst part of flying on a KC-135. The absolute worst part was there were no seats on the goddamn plane.
So they were just standing there?
I mean, yes, well, there were technically seats. They were called jump seats. There were these, like, canvas and webbing benches that ran along the side of the plane. And let me tell you something. If you think the aisle seat in a crowded coach class is uncomfortable, spend 10 hours sitting on a fucking lawn chair with a brutal hangover and having to piss in a bucket.
No, I can get us a discount on Spirit Airlines.
But at least it had jet engines. I mean, one time I flew across the Gulf of Mexico in a propeller-driven C-130 right around the edges of a tropical storm, puking my guts out the entire way, and that made the KC-135 seem like flying on the fucking Concorde. So I guess what I'm saying is the reason I don't fly much these days is that I've got some pretty serious cargo plane PTSD. But you know what? At least I didn't have to kill myself to get a ticket on one. That tangent brings us to this week's topic. The second part of Packing a Purple Shroud, the Heaven's Gate story. When we last left Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles, they had gathered a small group of believers and were living in the fucking woods pretending to build alien communication devices out of stacks of old tires.
Oh, that's hyperbole.
No, that is something they really did. They said it was a kind of team building exercise, but they were literally building starbases in state parks across the United States out of mud and old tires. This is the group, in their own words, taken from the still active heavensgate.com. Quote, an away team from the evolutionary level above human, an admiral and his captain and crew, during the 1920s to the 1950s, picked and prepped the human bodies which they would wear for the task we are about to describe. They came into these bodies in the 1970s, the admiral and the captain first. They began by rounding up their crew in 75 and assisting them in the process of entering and taking charge of their own assigned human bodies. They called the crew together by means of a public statement and meetings over a 9-month period. The media, typically hastily judging them, tagged them a UFO cult because of their expectation of leaving aboard a spacecraft UFO at the completion of their task. The two then took the ones who followed them into seclusion, completely separate from the world for almost 17 years, not only completing their awakening and their adjustment to their human bodies, but in this primitive civilization, but they also took them through a metamorphic classroom experience of changing over their consciousness and behavior to match with that of their distant culture from whence they had come. Unquote.
That's nothing but gibberish.
Yeah, well, welcome to the mind of Marshall Applewhite, so what the fuck can I tell you? Now, this seclusion is when the group, roughly about 24 people, spent their hours in the woods training their minds and bodies for the evolutionary level above human.
And that is?
Like I said last week, the core theology is just Christianity with some sci-fi tossed in, and this group was kind of like an order of monks living aesthetically and practicing various rituals to become closer to God, for lack of a better word. And the way they believed that they would become closer is by transforming into a kind of angel, which to their way of thinking was the next step in human evolution. You're probably wondering,
Then how do we get there?
well, first of all, you can't smoke, you can't drink, you can't do drugs, you can't have sex or even jerk off.
Yeah, I think I'll pass on that.
Also, you had to stop eating food that tasted good. Seriously, food for them was just fuel for these annoying human vessels, and you ate just enough to keep it functioning, but it could not at all be flavorful, just nutritious.
You guys big Guy Fieri fans?
Next, you have to disassociate yourself with all human connections, meaning all the people from your human life, like your parents, your siblings, your friends, your bartenders, all got to be cut off from contact. One of the reasons they were out in the fucking woods was to get as far away from the people in their human lives as possible. And then next, you had to train your mind to think on the next level by using ritual and behaviors designed by T and Doe. These sound more sinister than what they were. They were mostly just rote tasks performed in an exacting manner as dictated by the two. And to their credit, they also did these boring-ass mundane tasks as well. They weren't damaging or dangerous. They were just tedious and repetitive, intentionally so. The idea was to reprogram how you thought. They were specifically designed to identify and eliminate impulses, particularly sexual impulses, were antithetical to the ascension to the next level. Members would be paired off with one another in order to monitor and assist each other in overcoming the limitations of their human vehicle. And failure wasn't exactly punished, but if you slipped up, there were rituals to help you when you failed. Nothing physical, but generally rehabilitative, at least in the eyes of the group. It's important to understand that being in this group was voluntary, and any member was free to walk away at any time. Other cults would coerce members into staying by keeping their money, their IDs, or using emotional or physical manipulation. But T and Do designed their cult to get people to intentionally leave, if nothing else, out of sheer boredom and horniness.
Bored, hungry, horny.
At one time, the group had as many as 70 acolytes, and through this winnowing process, they pared it down to roughly the 40 or so of true believers that would go on to ascend in 1997. To understand this group dynamic, you need to understand T and Do, Applewhite and Nettles. Applewhite was the speaker who interpreted and explained the messages from the next level, and Nettles was the mystic, the connection to the next level, who received their signs and instructions and revealed them to Applewhite, who would then create the dogma and doctrine based on this information. The two were, according to them, one mind, shared and enlightened in their togetherness.
And I remember thinking they were crazy.
This would be an accurate summation of the situation. However, the two balanced out each other's crazy into a fairly benign level of lunacy. That was until the early 1980s.
Reagan.
I mean, it's kind of similar. I mean, it was a cancer. In 1983, Bonnie Nettles lost an eye to cancer. This was hugely problematic for her and Applewhite.
The eye patch is flesh colored to make people less uncomfortable.
No. It was because cancer did not fit into the messaging the next level had been passing on to them for nearly a decade. Nettles refused to do any kind of treatment for the cancer aside from having the eye removal, and she believed that she couldn't die because the next level had told her so.
Second opinion, please.
That second opinion arrived about 2 years later when Bonnie Nettles died in Dallas's Parkland Hospital with Applewhite by her side.
Like JFK and Jackie O.
She died from liver cancer. Marshall Applewhite told the rest of the group that T's broken down vehicle had been discarded and she had ascended to the next level to prepare the way for their eventual ascension. But with his other half gone, Applewhite began to veer into some darker places. And I guess this is as good a time as any to bring up the procedures.
Oh, come on, Donnie. They were threatening castration.
Quoting now from the New York Times, quote, "The group had occasionally discussed the procedure. From a practical point of view, Mr. Applewhite could see its merits after all. It's commonly done on animals other than humans. Still, he hesitated to grant his approval. Too worried about someone going to the police and saying, 'Look what they made me do,' Sawyer said." Sawyer was one of the groups. But over the course of a few years, Sawyer and the other men tried hard to convince Applewhite. This was really no different than the olden days when manservants to the Queen would be castrated so they couldn't try anything. And finally, Mr. Applewhite agreed to inquiries be made. American doctors routinely said no, but a surgeon's assistant in Mexico was willing enough. And in 1993, Stephen McCarter, perhaps the group's most gung-ho disciple, won a coin flip against Sawyer and began the first to have his testicles removed. The operation, which is not complicated, was nevertheless botched. Just pause here for every man listening to grab his crotch and wince. Now you're going to want to hold on. Mr. McCarter's scrotum failed to drain appropriately and resulted in massive swelling.
I'm out. Okay, I'm not playing.
In the years ahead, Mr. Applewhite and 7 others were castrated. By then, Sawyer, feeling compelled to do some thinking while outside the group had left. Presumably, he said, they went ahead after finding a better doctor to do it, unquote. So, yeah, that happened. And it almost certainly wouldn't have if Bonnie Nettles had still been alive. And this was just one way that shit was starting to get a little grim around the group campfires every night. This is the part of the show where we talk about the bummer shit, so I'm going to try to make it quick. While Bonnie Nettles was alive, the group was working on a literal interpretation of ascension, meaning an actual spaceship would appear on Earth and took their physical earthly body on board where it would be transformed into the next level. After Bonnie died, Herff started asking,
what if it doesn't?
with Bonnie already ascended, i.e. dead, what if the way to the next level wasn't so much that they would,
Beam us up.
But, you know, they had to shed this physical body entirely, and so he adjusted his theology accordingly?
Forget it. Forget it. No more beaming.
Wikipedia sums up the shift, quote, according to Heaven's Gate, once the individualist perfected himself through the process, there were 4 methods to enter or graduate to the next level. There was physical pickup onto a TILA, TILA is their acronym for the evolutionary level above human spacecraft, and transferred to a next level body aboard that craft. In this version, a UFO version of the Rapture, an alien spacecraft would descend to Earth and collect Applewhite Nettles and their followers, and their human bodies would be transformed through biological and chemical processes to perfected beings. Then there was natural death, accidental death, or death from random violence. Here, the graduating soul leaves the human container for a perfected next-level body. Then there was outside persecution that leads to death. After the deaths of the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas, and the events involving Randy Weaver at Ruby Ridge, Applewhite was afraid the American government would murder the members of Heaven's Gate. The American government did not know, and even if they had, would not have given a shit about these 39 seekers. Try not to be denigrating. Finally, going back to the text, there was a willful exit from the body in a dignified manner. Near the end, Applewhite had a revelation that they might have to abandon their human bodies and achieve the next level as Jesus had done. This occurred on March 22nd and 23rd, when 39 members died by suicide and graduated, unquote. This little theological adjustment took the better part of a decade to make happen. And in that time, the group emerged from their seclusion, began to formulate their doomsday theory, and send it out to warn the rest of humanity of its impending doom. They did this by classified ads, the time-honored way of leaving printed pamphlets in bus stations, and this new thing called
Welcome to the Revelation Superhighway.
This was a busy time to the group. Due to the sudden inheritance by one of their members, their money trouble is always a thorny issue for them since their isolationist lifestyle was not conducive to a 9-to-5 grind. But with this influx of cash and the group learning to code HTML for clients for the kind of websites that pretty much look like
.geocities.com/monk fan page,
they were able to live rather better than they were before. This included renting a mansion in San Diego. And from there, they did what we all did in the 90s, made our own webpage where they informed us, again from heavensgate.com, quote, the Earth's present civilization is about to be recycled, spaded under, in order that the planet might be refurbished. The human weeds have taken over the garden and disturbed its usefulness beyond repair. The human kingdom was designed, created as a stepping stone between the animal kingdom and the evolutionary kingdom level above human, the true kingdom of God. It is the soul that can progress from the human kingdom to the kingdom level above human. Both kingdom levels have their own unique physical containers, bodies, for the souls that reside in that kingdom level, unquote. Which, I mean, no one read that because this was back in the days when you just posted some shit for a few of your friends and hoped that they would share it with a few of their friends, and you know.
It was so good, I told 2 friends about it, and they told 2 friends, and so on, and so on, and so on.
Eventually reaching a couple of dozen people or so, most of whom you already knew. It's basically the same marketing strategy this podcast has used for 9 years to get the dozens of listeners we have today.
Great job, guys.
But hey, with Seltzer Kings on our side, we're hoping to hit, higher double digits. I mean, we can lop off a few of those Danny and Mike listeners with tales about botched castrations and military aircraft that have no relation to anything their listeners have ever experienced. I don't know. We're doomed. And then, well, one thing leads to another. And before you know it, this happened.
Hello? Yes, I need to report an anonymous tip. Who do I talk to?
Okay. This is regarding what?
This is regarding a mass suicide, and I can give you the address.
The address seemed the unlikeliest of places, a mansion in a quiet, affluent suburb of San Diego.
I mean, it was all very meticulously planned, which lets you know that Marshall Applewhite had thought about how this was going to go for a long time. and over 3 days, the members of the group assisted each other in their transition. I mean, they had gone out for a little bit of fun before the end times. They bought new shoes, new clothes, some spiffy purple sheets that they wore like shrouds, and they had a breakfast skillet at Denny's.
Whoa, big fella. That's not what skillets are for. Come on, move those paws.
Denny's has these big new breakfast skillets starting at $3.99.
Like the tasty farmer skillet, the garden fresh skillet, and the meat lover skillet. Right up your alley. Now, what have we learned?
It's better to eat from a skillet.
Right.
Then hit you with it.
Ouch.
Okay, technically they went to Marie Callender's, but I thought Denny's was funnier, and I'm pretty sure most of you don't know who Marie Callender's was. It was a restaurant, and they make really good frozen pot pies that you can buy in your grocery freezer case. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So they went out to dinner, and then they all went back to the mansion. They dressed in their away team uniforms, and they pieced the fuck out with some applesauce vodka and a shit ton of phenobarbital. In a particularly 90s piece of information, the group got this recipe for their suicide solution from the internet, probably from a Usenet forum with a fucked up name like Rec Humor Suicide Solution. I'm not even going to try to explain Usenets to you right now. That's a whole show by itself. 39 human beings with families and friends killed themselves because they thought a UFO was going to pick them up as it hid behind a comet. And look, this shit wasn't even Art Bell's fault.
My guest is Dr. Courtney Brown, Professor Courtney Brown. And I will endeavor to tell you a little bit more about him in a moment. We received a photograph from an amateur astronomer in Houston, Texas. As a matter of fact, I'll read you the facts very briefly. Urgent Art, strange objects sighted near Hale Bopp. Art, I have just taken some amazing photographs of Hale Bopp. They show a Saturn-like object near the comet. This thing, if it's solid and near the comet, would be about 4 times the size of Earth. I've called Hoagland. He says there have been other calls about this strange thing that just showed up tonight.
Admittedly, Art was peddling some very tenuously sourced bullshit by some absolute hucksters with zero reputation for credibility and was actually just, talking out of his ass. Art had airtime to fill. He was talking to some jackoff like me who was sitting in a truck drinking coffee and giggling at 3 a.m. He didn't know that a group of people who thought it was a good idea to lop their balls off was looking for a reason to punch out. And so, this little piece of information was how America came to grips with the last vestiges of the 70s cult movement, and America handled it in a very mature and responsible way.
ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Cowell. Good evening and welcome to a very special edition of Nightline where we're following a truly extraordinary breaking story. We're all familiar by now with the story of Marshall Applewhite and the Heaven's Gate cult, 39 lost souls following a deranged Pied Piper to an untimely end, or so it seemed until 2 days ago when ABC News began receiving strange microwave transmissions from deep space. With the help of NASA scientists, at 11 this evening we were able to decipher these signals, and so now live via satellite from the alien spacecraft is cult leader Marshall Applewhite.
The SNL skit was not that bad, and Will Ferrell was hilarious as Marshall Applewhite, but they took it too far when, right after Rob Lowe's monologue, they ran a spoof commercial for Keds shoes in which they used actual fucking footage of the dead Heaven's Gate members focusing in on their Nike shoes. I know I've made some pretty tasteless jokes in this series, but even I have to draw the line of using the images of actual dead people to mock their death for very cheap jokes. I mean, Letterman, he went too far as well when he did a top 10 list, signs you're in a bad cult. And Leno, as you can imagine, was all over this like stink on shit. But when you think shit, you think Jay Leno.
Why don't you tell us how you really feel?
No, I do. I refer you to episode 436.
That's a plug.
This did not go unnoticed at the time. The Deseret News wrote, quote, "But I'm the only one who's put off with the late night one-liners aimed at the Heaven's Gate cult. Hearing Jay Leno, David Letterman, Conan O'Brien, and Bill Maher joke about the poor misguided souls who took part in that methodical mass suicide conjures up a sense of deja vu. And I felt the same way about O.J. Simpson jokes during and after his criminal trial and civil trials. In both situations, people were killed. To me, this is a tragedy, not a comedy, unquote. And Joshua Molina, not the famous Joshua Molina, I checked, wrote in the Ohio State University Lantern in 1997, quote, "It's funny how pop stars like Kurt Cobain could put guns to their heads and be revered as cultural icons who died far too young, but when 39 people who were waiting to catch a next UFO into a new galaxy killed themselves, they're stigmatized as freaks. Their deaths should be mind-boggling, puzzling, and worthy of inspiring people to want to learn more about these types of people. I hate to think that if I got wrapped up in some group and let them control my life to the point where I lost all sense of reality, that after I died, people were cracking jokes about my death. These people were confused and delusional. That doesn't mean their lives didn't mean anything or that they were less than anyone else's," unquote. And the LA Times wrote about it 20 years later, quote, "Gallows humor has long been a way for people to deal with tragedies, to give themselves some distance and relief from the horror. But with Heaven's Gate, there may have been something else at work," according to Benjamin Zeller, a associate professor of religion at Lake Forest College near Chicago, and the author of 2014's book about the cult. "In some ways, I think it was too close for comfort," he said. "Too close because many of the beliefs that the group members held are similar to those found in more mainstream religions. Belief in a heavenly father, belief in the importance of the soul over the body, belief that they were engaged in an eternal fight of good versus evil, belief in salvation and an afterlife somewhere up there, belief in the end times. It's too easy to just dismiss them as nuts," unquote. I mean, they were nuts, absolute loonies. They'd lost all connection to reality and sincerely believed that a spaceship was going to magically transport them to heaven. And the only way they could get on that spaceship is to drink a suicide smoothie in a San Diego mansion. This is not the behavior of rational human beings. But what's different here than, say, Jonestown or Waco is that no one forced them to do it. You can watch their exit interviews, the videos they made before they killed themselves. They all knew and understand that they were going to die, and they stated clearly that they were doing it of their own free will. And you could argue that Marshall Applewhite had spent the last 20 years brainwashing them, but I don't see it that way. Each and every one of this cult was a sad, broken person who had found something in this group of like-minded lunatics that made their lives have purpose, that made them feel like something had meaning, and to them, it was worth their mortal lives to reach a paradise, and I can't blame Marshall Applewhite from that, because that shit comes from churches, temples, and mosques, from millennia of religion and religious indoctrination that all teach that our lives on this world, on this planet, on this plane of existence are intrinsically worthless, and our only reward for the sheer fuckery of being born can only come after we are no longer alive. And pod friends, as a philosophy, that is deeply, wickedly, and cruelly fucked up. Like I said, I'm an atheist, so I like it for the clean, clear, simple message it carries. This shit is all you got. Good and bad, from the moment you slid out your mom's hoo-ha to that little pinpoint of light when your brain shuts down forever from oxygen starvation. That is all you will ever have. The moral imperatives that govern an atheist behavior is based entirely on being trapped in this flesh puppet with 7 billion other flesh puppets just trying to make it from the one end of birth to the other end of death. And that goes a lot easier if we try not to be total dicks to each other.
Maybe I should start a religion.
Okay.
And hey, if it helps you personally to believe that there is some great afterlife where you go when you croak, where all your pets are waiting for you, fuck you, man. Go for it. I don't give a shit. But again, not being a total dick to each other calls for tolerance. I don't hate religions or religious people. I mean, I hate it when they use their religion to tell other people what to do and how to live, but that has nothing to do with the religion. That is all about them being, total dicks. But I will tell you this, no matter what you believe and how strongly you believe it, you got to pay attention to anyone, be they a podcast host, a pope, or a preacher, and especially some bug-eyed, bowl-cut Uber nerd who are telling you that they, and they alone, have some big insight to the great beyond, because they don't know anything more than what you know. Ask yourself this one simple question. Why would God or aliens tell this person who claims to know it all this information and no one else? Because if God or the aliens want humanity to do or become something, they're not going to tell Herff and Bonnie in Houston. They're going to make the best TikTok ever and blast it into everyone's brain at the same time because these are next level dudes. And also, and this is important, you can jerk off all you want. I mean, do it in private or do it with someone who wants to jerk off with you. But the gods or aliens aren't telling you not to jerk off because you know what? They like to watch.
Then stroke it. Stroke it. Stroke it hard.
And finally, my last piece of advice. Keep your balls. Just hang on to them. No matter if they're causing you problems or whatever else is going on in your mind, keep your balls. Keep them. Eventually, you'll be glad you did.
I found a kid who swings a golf club like a dream. I'd like to try to qualify him for the U.S. Amateurs.
Coming to Apple TV+.
What's your name?
I'm not into older guys, but I'm flattered.
A new comedy series, Stick.
I don't want to go on this trip. Your mouth's saying one thing, but those eyes are saying something else.
From the home of Ted Lasso.
This is your shot at redemption? This is your mulligan?
Owen Wilson.
This game takes and it takes. The game's finally giving me something back.
Stick.
You know Arnold Palmer?
Iced tea, lemonade, mix it.
I'm missing a nap for this.
Streaming June 4th on Apple TV+.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
That is it for the show this week. Yes, I completely recognize that I spent 2 full episodes making jokes, but they were jokes about Herff and not his followers. And honestly, even the Herff jokes, they were pretty tame. At least I didn't use photos of the dead people for show art. The AI image generator wouldn't let me put a fat, red-headed, bearded man in with dead people. And also, I mean, I did cut a whole section about Art Bell in the comment because one of these days I'm going to do a whole series about Art Bell, and that's going to be a big part of it. Even, you know, I know you don't want me to do that, but I don't do this show for you. I do it for me. And on that note, rate and review us. Kick us $1 at patreon.com for What the Hell Podcast, because Daddy needs a new pair of discount Nikes. Check out the Seltzer Kings Discord server. There's a link in the show notes. I'm putting stuff over there. I mean, it's the same stuff I put up everywhere, but this is on Discord, which apparently matters. And do all the things Jeremy tells you to do in the closing credits. Otherwise, Jeremy will have me out building starbases out of old tires behind the Seltzer King Clubhouse in Paramus. Swing by if you're in the neighborhood. Danny and Mike are there.
That is a total lie.
Yeah, we don't actually have a clubhouse, and I don't actually. I keep asking for one for Jeremy to introduce me to them, but he keeps telling me no. And so for me, Dave, have you had so many relationships in this life? Only 1 or 2 will last, Bledsoe. Producer.
You go through all the pain and strife, then turn your back and they're gone so fast.
Gavin, and all the fictional Hanson brothers on this show, we want to say, in the end, they'll be the only ones there. And when you're old and start losing your hair, can you tell me who will still care? And that would be the next little aliens. And so, we'll see you all next week.
What the Hell Were You Thinking stars Dave Bledsoe and features Gavin St. James and several fictional minions. The show is produced by Kimberly Steele and a part of the Seltzer Kings podcast network. You can find more information on the show on their website, whatthehellpodcast.com, or on Twitter at @thehell_podcast, or on Facebook as What the Hell Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I have no ending for this, so I take a small bow.
John Hinckley. Temporary insanity.
Seltzer Kings
Podcasts.